WABC WJR. Here's special guest host Kevin Dietz.
Are you of the mind that the governor of Michigan has too much power, too much ability to take actions into her own hands without notifying or getting input from the Republican legislature? Well, that might just be changing soon. There is a battle brewing in Lansing involving the $5 billion the state received in federal COVID-19 funding in late 2020. The Republican state legislature is ready to authorize about $4 billion of those dollars, but releasing the last $1 billion comes with strings attached. The GOP measures are looking to take away emergency powers from the state health department director, which pretty much means the governor would lose that power she has wielded throughout the pandemic. Governor Gretchen Whitmer has opposed similar moves in the past. She's used the veto to do it, but this time it's a little bit different. Vetoing the emergency power bills puts at risk a massive amount of federal aid intended for schools in fighting the pandemic. A veto by the governor may not go over so well. Joining us now is David Dulio, professor of political science at Oakland University. David, welcome back to the show.
Good to talk to you.
Yeah, so this seems very interesting. Is it possible the GOP could wrestle emergency powers away?
Well, it's possible, but, this latest, let's maybe volley in this game between the legislature and the governor, it may be different than the previous ones, but there's some similarities there too, and it's really both sides using the powers that they have in the Michigan Constitution to basically check one another, right? The legislature is trying to use the tools that it has to get what it wants, and the governor is going to use the same tools potentially.
So walk us through how this is likely to play out. Where are we at this point?
Well, the legislature seems poised to pass these bills, which, as you say, is full of funding, but also curbing some powers that the state health director has, and which is also important to note, since over the summer the governor lost a lawsuit in the Michigan Supreme Court that Republicans had brought to knock down some emergency powers she was wielding. But again, in this sort of serve and volley match that's been going on, the powers that she was trying to wield, she just simply transferred over under a different law to the state health director. So there's always this back and forth, and I think folks need to remember that it's the legislature in Michigan that spends money, that decides how dollars are spent. Now, the governor has to sign that into law, but it's the legislature that writes these spending bills, and that's what's happening now. And as we said, one of them has some strings attached to it, so it remains to be seen what the governor does. She could sign it, all this money would get spent, those emergency powers from the health director would be curbed, or she could veto it, and nothing would change, or she might try to veto certain parts of it with a line item veto.
Is the idea that the Republican legislature said, look, we're going to pretty much give you $4 billion of the $5 billion, however, to spend the way you see fit, the way you want to spend it. But this last $1 billion, or I think it's $850 million, to get this money, you got to give up these powers. Do you think that the fact that they're offering to be so kind, maybe kind is not the right word, but they're offering to cooperate so much on the first $4 billion helps with the possibility of getting that, or do you think this fight will go right to the bitter end?
Oh, I think it'll go to the bitter end. I think the Republican legislature has tried this before and tried to appropriate some of this money, and the governor vetoed it. And maybe this is the next iteration in that, right, where they say, okay, well, that didn't work, let's try this. But I think that it's a lot to give up. The change in who would control public health orders would change dramatically under these new bills, and given how she's approached it in the past, I'm doubtful that the governor would just be so quick to give it up.
So do you think maybe it's more that this willingness to put the first $4 billion in play is more to keep the public happy so that they don't come back and say, oh, we got to vote out these Republicans who refuse to let us have access to these billions of dollars in relief, and then just held back $1 billion thinking that, maybe they won't be punished for that and might be able to get their way. How much say does the public have, or what public reaction? How will that sway what happens here?
It will certainly, elected officials have their ear to the ground and are always in tune or trying to be in tune with what their constituents are thinking, and which is a good thing. They represent us, and they certainly should take that into consideration. And the political blame game is always part of that calculation, right? So should the governor veto these bills, who gets blamed, and where does the political price fall? Does it fall on the governor for vetoing them and not having all of those needed dollars spent on things that the public is really behind, opening schools, vaccinations, etc.? Or does it fall on the legislature for trying to curb those powers or tying such a different item to dollars that could be spent pretty quickly? And it's hard to handicap that. Sometimes these things take a few days or a week to try to to play out, and that's when we'll have a better sense. And it always is a bit of a roll of the dice on these kinds of things, because sometimes even though we might think we know how they're going to play out, they don't turn out that way.
Yeah, and a lot of times, the public just gets sort of this headline, relief money, good, let me have it. But when you dig into the details, it's not always exactly that simple. People who support this bill are saying, look, this gives power to the local health officials instead of, the governor's office with the statewide mandates. But if you look at it a little closer, the law actually dictates really specific case rate criteria for when an order can be given. So it may even take that process out of local health officials' hands if it gets right down to specific numbers. So you really have to peel it back and look at it to see what it is before just saying, they should do it or they shouldn't do it.
Oh, absolutely. And this is a great example of the old adage that the devil's in the details, right? That there are so many complexities to this, so many layers to what's really in this legislation, that a one sentence or even a paragraph summary doesn't tell you everything. And it is another example of things just being a much deeper, much more complex public policy issue that is on the table.
The Republicans offering a deal that's too good to refuse, but will likely get refused by the governor anyway. I think that's where we're at. David, we appreciate you being on the show. As usual, thanks for stepping in and explaining this to us.
Of course. Thank you.